again, we were like, oh my gosh, like he can beat it. He can beat it. He's going to be like this case where we kept saying like, we're going to write a book. I kept saying, I'm going to write a book about this. I'm going to write a book about this. Like, this is amazing. And so, yeah, he became NED again while he was on that vaccine.
Hey, welcome to another episode of The Day After. On this episode, we talk with Laura, who goes deep into what it was like being a caregiver to her husband, who ultimately passed away from cancer. This episode is an absolute fucking roller coaster of emotion. So grab your coffee, grab your tea, your water, whatever the fuck you drink, sit back, listen, and enjoy. And while I have you, don't forget, if you didn't see, we actually dropped our first line of merch, our logo t-shirts. So go ahead on thedayafter.com, grab your size before we sell out. I promise it is something you will grab over and over and over again to wear. All right, thank you and enjoy the show. Hi, Laura. Thanks for joining and for being on the podcast. We definitely are thankful to have you here. And I guess let's just start with telling us a little bit about kind of your situation and the grief and the loss that you've experienced.
Sure. I am Laura. I'm a widow. I still don't even like saying, I hate that word actually, but my husband, in 2014 was diagnosed with a very rare cancer. And there was a lot that kind of led up to that I won't get into because it's a very long story. But he was misdiagnosed a couple times. He had this little bump on his back, on his vertebrae. And I pushed him to go in. And the doctor, of course, gave him antibiotics and steroids. And it's just inflammation. And weeks later, he ended up getting an MRI, and a spine specialist told him, I'm pretty sure it's cancer. I think it's lymphoma. Weeks later, they changed to carcinoma. It was the craziest time of my life. We didn't know what was what he had, if it was curable, incurable. He was 43 years old, in great shape, other than the cancer. And anyways, it took a lot of time, weeks and weeks of different people weighing in until finally I ended up requesting his sample be sent to California for cytogenetic testing. And it came back. It was like a new type of testing. I still don't know if they use that for diagnoses, but they use it to help them with diagnoses. And it came back as like 95% Ewing sarcoma. And nobody had ever heard of it. We were like, what is Ewing sarcoma? And they had already told us, we think it's lymphoma. No, we think it's carcinoma. And then we get this Ewing sarcoma, which we're looking it up. And of course, you look everything up on the internet and there's no real research on it. And everything you read is bad. And so we were beside ourselves. We ended up going down to Sloan Kettering in New York City. Sent his biopsy down there, and they verified, yes, it is Ewing sarcoma. It's a very rare cancer in children. It's a pediatric cancer.
Wow.
And the fact that my husband had it at 43 made it not only rare for kids, but even more rare that he was in his 40s with this pediatric cancer. So anyways, they tell us the regimen is a 10-month-long inpatient chemo, you need radiation. At that point, he had already had emergency surgery before that because he started losing feeling in the nerves going down his back. He started becoming paralyzed.
Oh, wow.
So they did emergency surgery. They still didn't know it. That was here in Rochester. They still didn't know what it was at that point. So he had already done the surgery, massive surgery. It ended up being not this little bump that we saw on the outside, but it was like the size of a tennis ball inside his body.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Anyway, so then we did the verification through Sloan Kettering to see what his treatment would be like. And then we came back up here to Rochester to Strong Hospital and started chemotherapy. He had 6 weeks of radiation before that. and he was in the hospital 5 days at a time with 5 different chemo drugs. And then he'd come home for 3 weeks and then go back for 3 days at a time and then come home for 3 weeks and then go back, repeat for 10 months.
And how long ago was this when he was first diagnosed?
So 2014 was when we found the bump. The actual diagnosis from Sloan Kettering wasn't, so that was November after Thanksgiving. He got the actual diagnosis March of 2015. And so chemo was March through December.
Okay. Yeah, that was the exact same time my wife had her diagnosis, was my 30th birthday.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is crazy.
So how did you guys meet, if we take it back a little bit?
Yeah, we are both from Rochester. I'm from the east side, Penfield. He's from west side, Greece. He would always make fun of me and say I live the silver spoon life from the east side. That was his joke. But we ended up both living with our roommates, like our best friends, in the Park Ave area of Rochester, right across the street from each other. And so
I love that.
Yeah, so like we hung out as group, a group of friends at the beginning for a couple of months. And then I will never forget, because 9/11 happened. And we were friends at that point, but we started having longer conversations like on the phone. And when I remember talking about 9/11 a lot with him. And then we went out one night and came back dating, like from the bar, came back dating. And that was like September 2001.
How long after you guys dated did you get married?
We got married in 2004. So we dated for 2 years, engaged for 1 year. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys were together for over a decade when he got his diagnosis.
Yeah.
13 years?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So at that point of diagnosis, you go to get the specialists and all that other stuff, and kind of going through that whole trial. After you learned about the Sloan Kettering and all that stuff, what was the progression from there until his passing?
So he went through that 10 months of chemo, which was, he was amazing. Like, he tolerated it amazingly well. We just had such positive feelings during that time, because he was just strong mentally. He was strong physically. He would like go on the treadmill at the hospital, where I know other people, because I started joining Facebook groups and trying to get information, because there was really nothing out there on this.
Yeah, I was going to ask, sorry to interrupt you. Did you do the research to find out about that test that you should do, and the biopsy that they sent to California?
I didn't really look so much into that cytogenetic testing, because the doctors had kind of said, like, I don't want you guys to take this as the be all to end all diagnosis. Like, it's something that's new that we're using, but it hasn't been proven to be, the way to go. We'll use it with other things. And so they used it along with his biopsy that we sent to Sloan. Unfortunately, Rochester, they rarely see ewing sarcoma. They see like 2 cases a year in adults, and Sloan Kettering sees like 100. So Rochester was baffled by his biopsy. Yeah. They could not figure out. And to this day, that pathologist has not changed her stance. She's like, no, I think it was carcinoma. Like, she hasn't changed now. So that made me...
that must have been so frustrating.
It was so frustrating. It was scary to me. So that made me really dive into the world of ewing sarcoma and want to find out everything I could possibly know, because I didn't have faith in her. I didn't have faith in the hospital here. They barely saw anybody that had it. So I learned as much as I could, and I feel like I became an expert on it because I had to.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my role for 6 years, is research, Facebook groups. And so while he was going through the chemo, I could see like how people dealt with chemo, and they were like, they would have to go back in the hospital because their blood counts were low. And he was just this like Hercules, like he went through it like a champ. It was just hard mentally for him, because he's stuck in, a hospital when he feels okay. Just mentally being, pounded and wanting to be out and wanting to be with his kids. My daughter was 1 and my other 2 kids were 4 and 6, and he just wanted to be with us and he couldn't. And it was just this helpless feeling. So he relied on people coming to be with him at the hospital during that time. So anyways, he did fine physically through that whole 10 months. When he finished, it was like December 2015. And by that point, I learned a lot. I was a part of a lot of different communities on Facebook. Facebook was my saving grace, I have to say. And I had learned that there was this specialist, this great specialist at Cleveland Clinic named Dr. Pete Anderson. And everybody kept talking about him. You got to go to Pete. You got to go see Pete Anderson. He's the guy that knows it all. He thinks outside the box. You got to go to him. And so I scheduled an appointment with him when my husband Alan finished treatment, and we went to go see him. Oh, I know. Because Strong Hospital didn't really know a lot about Ewing's, they didn't really know what to tell us as far as how many chemo treatments he should do.
Oh shit.
So they were, so they were like, well, kids can do 17 rounds of chemo. And they said, but adults are different. They don't have, they're older, their cells aren't as strong, that, they suffer a lot more. They have to have transfusions. So they're like, we're going to aim for 12 for my husband. And I'm like, I don't want him to just do 12 if kids are doing 17. And what if he can handle 17? They're like, well, our goal is 12. And so, and that made me question everything and like go on my groups and like, what do I do? And they're like, go see Pete Anderson. So that's what led me to make an appointment with this guy at Cleveland Clinic, who became the best thing that happened to us, I have to say. And we go there and he says, latest research says 14 rounds for adults. So he's like, I recommend 2 more. You go back to Rochester, do 2 more. And he also said to us, because of your surgery and the scans and the fact that he has no cancer in his body right now, I believe he has an 80% chance of being cured.
Wow.
Like that it's not going to come back, because I'm not sure. I think a lot of cancers are like this, but like if you can catch it when it's localized in one spot, your prognosis is so much better.
Way better, yeah. So
with Ewing's, it was all or nothing. If you had it localized in one spot, your outcome, your prognosis was like, 75, 80% chance that it's not coming back. If it travels and it's like in 2 parts of your body, it's the opposite. Yep. Your prognosis for 5-year survival is like 30% survival, 70% chance it's coming back. So at that point, this sarcoma specialist was like, yours was localized. It was in your back. It's out. We got it, they got it out immediately. And you withstood all these chemo treatments. You didn't have delays. You didn't have to cut it short. You're going to go do 2 more. I think you've got this high chance of cure. And so we were like elated. We were like, this is great, because everything you read on the internet is like depressing. And it's like people don't survive because they were so far behind on the internet with research and reporting. So we felt so confident. We're like, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's the best of the best. We were still obviously worried, but we felt this renewed sense of peace and like, okay, we can do this. We can do this. And so we came back to Rochester. He finishes 2 more rounds, and he was done in December of 2015. And we kind of went back to life.
So before you move on with that, I'm curious, as you're going through all of this, it sounds like some of the things you did were research and kind of trying to take control. But from you and your perspective, how did you handle and how did you cope with that enormous stress of like watching your husband go through this and having the 3 children?
It was really hard. And I have anxiety alone without, all of this happening to us. So for me, it was really tough. Thankfully, because we're both from Rochester, our families are all here. And our families, we could never have done all of this without them. He's got 2 brothers who he was always close with them, but this brought them even closer together. His parents are very close still to us. And same with my family. I have a sister and my parents are in Penfield. And so it was a lot of them being over at our house all the time. I would go to the hospital to be with him as much as I possibly could. So my life was like, I'd go to the hospital, stay with him for a couple hours, come home, take care of the kids. My parents would be there. His parents would be there. My kids, you have that guilt of like, my kids are in front of screens all the time because what am I going to do? I'm just trying to survive the day and be there for my husband who's mentally like falling apart and be there for my kids. So they were young enough, thankfully, that I don't think they have a lot of memories from those 10 months. They remember his hair falling out. He was, he's bald. He had no eyebrows, no facial hair, which is shocking for a kid, I think, to see. So they do remember that, and they'll look at pictures and be like, "Oh yeah, I remember when Dad didn't have hair."
We made it a game.
Did you?
So we just, once, because they're pretty good about the timing. They're like, he'll start to fall out at here, and then at this point, it's going to be all gone. So I think it was like 2 weeks or after 2 rounds. So once we did the second round, we just sat, and I have a video of it, and the kids just kind of like made it a game and started pulling out and see who could pull out the most hair. Yeah. From my wife. Yeah.
That's a good idea too. Like trying to get the kids into helping out, being a part of it, I guess. Yeah.
So it sounds like you had family to lean on for support.
Lots of family, lots of good friends around. It was, but man, it was hard. And also I'm still learning through all this 10 months. I'm like trying to get as much knowledge as I could. Like I became OCD almost, where I was like, I'm finding out everything. I'm going to do everything to keep my husband alive. Like that was my goal. And so I started, I would find like naturopaths and I would meet with them and be like, what can I do? What can I do? And so I started him on a regimen of like smoothies, and then I started juicing. I was doing all that. And that's like, it takes up so much time.
So much time.
And you're shopping for like all these crazy ingredients. Did you do that too?
I did. So I wanted to ask, like, what was your husband's response? Because actually I should ask first, like, how long did you do that for? And then like, what was your husband's response? Because it came to a point with my wife, because I was doing the same thing. And I'm just like, I'm in books, I'm reading, and I'm like, okay, you got to take this supplement, and then you should eat this, and you should do this, and this is going to help support. It's not that I didn't believe in the chemo and all that stuff, but I'm like, everything that I can do to get you even a day increase of your healthy lifespan, I'm going to do. And then it was probably 2 years before she died. I remember very distinctly walking up into our room, and she was in bed already, and she was just like, you need to fucking stop. She's like, you have to leave me alone. And she's like, I want to just live the rest of my life just enjoying and doing what I can. I don't want to take all this stuff. I don't want to try to be this regimen. She's like, I'm going to die and I just want to live. And it was really, it was a dose of reality for me of like, okay, I need to back the fuck up and let her kind of take the reins and guide me on how much she wants. But yeah, I'm curious how your husband responded.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that. My husband trusted in me to be that person that learned everything, because he knew that it was all he could do just to go through chemo and radiation and maintain like his physical health. So he was kind of like, whatever you learn, like I'm willing to do it. So that first year he was doing as much as he could, like with the juicing. I mean, it was nasty and it was disgusting. And I would try to do it with him because I felt bad. I'd be like, I'll do it with you. Did you too?
Yeah, everything that
me
I
too.
ever knew I did.
I'm like, I'm going to do it too.
Diet,
yeah, me too.
I've been on every supplement.
Yes.
And I'm like, I am all in with you. And I found myself resenting her if I would be like, you're not doing what I asked you to do. And I would get so resentful.
I would too.
and be like, you're throwing away your life and you're going to leave me here with the kids and I can't handle this.
I was like that too. I was like, how could you not do everything there possibly is out there? Like, like this is for you. This is for us. This is for me. This is for them. Yeah. I would get frustrated too. I would go like back and forth. I'd feel terrible for him. But then I'd also be like, oh, why can't you just take that set of pills this morning?
Exactly.
Yeah. So he did the juicing and I would bring it to the hospital when I'm like, you're not eating that hospital food. Whatever you do, don't you dare eat that hospital food. And he didn't want it anyway. So I would go out and get food for him every day. Like not necessarily fast food, but I'd go out and get salads or I'd get, I'd walk from the hospital and that was kind of my like fresh air for the day. And I'd bring back lunch or whatever. And then I would bring smoothies to him. I'd bring juicing to him and he would get it down and I'd bring the cup back home and start over again the next day. It was so stressful though. It was like I felt like if I didn't do all this, like I was going to let us all down.
Yes.
Like I had this like weight of the world on me where I was like, if I don't want to do this every day, but if I don't, like, what if I don't? And it's the one thing that saves him. It was like this desperation of like, what if this is the saving grace for him? Which I actually ended up learning as time went on and I got smarter and learned more and joined more groups. And then I got connected with an integrative oncologist. So I went from naturopath, who's not an MD, to I find this oncologist who's an MD, but also was so experienced with everything you could do along with, like she believed in chemo, she believed in radiation, but she's like, but you can also do all these other things.
Exactly.
And so I connected with her. She was in Oregon. Crazy amount of money I spent on her. But she was like, you can't give him smoothies. You can't juice. She's like, his glucose level is sky high. And I'm like, I thought I was helping him. And she's like, no, she's like, he's pre-diabetes right now. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm hurting him. I was like, I was like, what am I doing? Who do I trust? How do I know who to believe? Because this person told me to do this. So I totally stopped doing all that because he literally was at a pre-diabetes like glucose level. And she had him switch to the ketogenic diet.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Oh my God. That was insane.
Yeah. Did Ariana do that?
Yeah. I did it with her for years. Yeah.
What is that benefit for cancer? I've never heard that.
I mean, it's, the science is up in the air, but like I could imagine as somebody who's pre-diabetic just trying to get that down.
Oh,
right. Because you're not going to spike it, but I don't know. I don't want to speak to the medical stuff.
No, of course. Yeah.
There's so many specific things, but it's interesting because I found, and I'm assuming you had the same thing, Laura, is like, as soon as people knew that Ariana was sick, everybody came out of the woodwork. Oh, you should do this. You got to do this. You should try this. You should do that. And I'm like, but cancer is very specific. It's not like every single person is unique.
Right.
And like you said, like juicing was bad for him, but maybe it's good for somebody else. And I think that's part of that anxiety of like, I don't know what to do. And I'm losing this life that I thought I was going to have.
Yep.
So this was December 2015. So you go back to life as normal. How long does that last until a reoccurrence?
So December 2015. And then they were like, okay, we're scanning you every 3 months, to just make sure you're good.
Yep.
So scans every 3 months. So it was like, what is that? March scan was good. June scan is good. So we're going along and we're like, he's got this, I mean, we were nervous every 3 months. You're holding your breath.
Yep.
But we kind of went back to, all right, I think he's good. I think, his hair came back. He looked normal again. And, he was dad again. He was back home with us. And so he had a year of good scans.
NED. Yeah.
Yep. NED. Yep. And then February, I think it was like 1st. It was 15 months at that point. He had his normal scan and I'm waiting for him to get back to me and say, all's good. And then I think I got a call from his nurse at Strong. And she's like, Alan wanted me to call you because he didn't want to tell you. He wanted me to tell you what the scan looks like. He's got a couple spots on his lungs. She's like, we're still waiting on results from his back, but she's like, he wanted me to explain it to you. And I was like, my heart just dropped.
Yeah.
And then like a couple minutes later, I don't remember if he called me or she called me, but he's like, it's all over my back too.
Oh my gosh. In like a 3-month span?
3-month span, it went from he's NED still, things are good, to he's got spots in his lungs. And then not where he had the surgery, but like right above it, he had like, his surgery was like T12 to L2, and it was like T10, T9, T7. And I'm like, oh my gosh. He is a matter of fact type of guy, like just wants you to tell it to me straight. And he said to his nurse, like, how long do I have? And that was the worst. And she said, well, she said, some people can live for a couple years, if they keep it under control, but the key is to finding a treatment that works. And she's like, some people don't live very long because the treatment isn't successful. And that was just like a knife to your heart. You're just like, we're in huge trouble.
Yeah. So you find this out. I remember that moment. It was the same thing. A couple of months, one scan, and then the next scan was lungs, bowels, 17 spots on her brain, in her ribs, in her back, and in her liver.
Isn't it crazy that it can grow in all those places so quickly?
So quick. So you and Alan come home. What do you say to the kids?
Oh gosh. Our kids didn't know that he had cancer until right before he died.
Okay.
As crazy as that sounds, that just, I hear so many stories of how people tell their kids and deal with their kids, but Alan is the most private person you will ever meet. The hardest thing for him about going through cancer was he didn't want anyone to know.
Yeah.
He wanted to be like blend into the background always. And so when he lost his hair, that was like the worst thing that could have ever happened to him, because everybody knew then. There's no way you can hide that. He didn't wear wigs or really hats or anything. I mean, he did when it was cold, but we never told the kids, like, until the very end. We would say, Dad, we didn't use the word cancer, I should say. We would say things like, Dad has a spot on his back that needed surgery, or Dad has, but he never wanted me to use the word cancer with the kids. And I just respected his wishes through the whole, because mentally it became my job to keep him up. I was the researcher, but I was also the person who had to keep him mentally okay, because that was his hardest thing. It wasn't the physical stuff. It was the mental and emotional stuff that was hardest for him. So I immediately I emailed Dr. Anderson at Cleveland Clinic that same day that he had scans. And I'm like, Dr. Anderson, I don't know if you remember us, but we got ourselves established with him, thankfully, those 15 months earlier, which was the best thing we could have done, because we were in the system at Cleveland Clinic and he remembered us. And I said, my husband just relapsed. This is what his scan looked like. He called me at home that night at like 8 at night.
The doctor?
Dr. Anderson.
Wow.
Dr. Anderson. And that just was the beginning of an amazing relationship we had with him as a doctor, as a person. I can't say enough about him, but that kind of paints a picture of what he was like through our time with him. Yeah, he called me at home and I was taking notes desperately, because he's like, all hope is not lost. There's this coming out, and there's this coming out, and there's this and this. And I was like starting to feel like, oh my gosh, it might be okay. Like, maybe we can get past this. Maybe we can get past this. And so he knew all of the latest stuff that was going on. They were doing this crazy vaccine trial at Cleveland Clinic where they took your tissue and they combined it with this vaccine that was made.
Yeah.
And it was very new at the time for this type of cancer. They'd never done anything like it, but they had this survivor, Carly Rutledge, who she was like 20 years old. She had this vaccine. She had a spot in her lung that came back. They gave her this vaccine, and she was like a 5-year survivor at the time. So they were trying it with other people, and they were using like really small groups of people. And long story short, it didn't almost work out for us, but then it did. So Alan went to Cleveland Clinic that summer. They took out his lung tumor. They made a vaccine with it. And for like the next year, he would go back to Cleveland every month and get like a shot, like a flu shot in his arm. And he was NED.
What?
No shit.
Oh my goodness.
For that whole year. 2016, he became NED again.
Holy shit.
The vaccine like wiped out. He was also the vaccine was paired with 2 chemo drugs, both oral. So he could take those at home, and then he would go to Cleveland for this vaccine.
Damn.
Every month. So we were back and forth a lot. Thankfully, it's only 4 hours. Yeah, it was such a roller coaster. But again, we were like, oh my gosh, like he can beat it. He can beat it. He's going to be like this case where we kept saying like, we're going to write a book. I kept saying, I'm going to write a book about this. I'm going to write a book about this. Like, this is amazing. And so, yeah, he became NED again while he was on that vaccine. But yeah, so that was great news. Everything felt like it was falling into place again. We were very cautiously optimistic. We didn't want to get ahead of ourselves. And I was continuing to research and talk to people and learning. And yeah.
I just can't even imagine the like highs and lows.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking.
NED every month, every 3 months, and then the vaccine working, and then it's like, I just can't even imagine. I can't.
Yeah, and there were so many like hiccups during that time too. It's all these little blips that you kind of forget about because you're just thinking about like all the main parts of your, years going through this. But we did have a lot of, hiccups, I guess, that made things kind of complicated at points. But the good news was he was back to not having cancer.
So you went another year, and then presumably it comes back.
Yeah, so we were hearing about other people who had this vaccine that started relapsing. After like a year, we were like, oh no, like, is this going to be him? And I kept, I was like the cheerleader. I was like, no, it's not going to be you. You're good. Like, we're doing all this extra stuff. I kept saying that. I'm like, nobody else has an integrative oncologist. Nobody else is doing the ketogenic diet. Like, and it was just a lot, but we were both kind of on the same page. Like, well, this is what we have to do. This is what we have to do. But eventually he did relapse again.
And when was this? What year was this?
Oh gosh. I think it was 2006, 17.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
17, or maybe it was 18. I lose track of time. I think it was 18. 2017 was when he did the vaccine trial. And then 2018, it came back again. Like, there'd be a spot that popped up in his hip and then his pelvic.
Yep.
There'd be spots that,
that's right.
And you're like, oh. So then we started like just lots of radiation.
Yes.
Radiate this spot.
Yep.
Radiate this spot.
Yep.
So it became a life of like radiation.
Yeah, which is brutal.
And chemo.
Yeah.
Brutal. But then we had all these, like, looking back now, I'm like, I can't believe we had all these things that kind of happened to us that were blessings, like the vaccine trial. And then at one point they got this new researcher at Cleveland Clinic, and he was a radiology oncologist / researcher, took his tissue and he tested it among all these different chemo drugs. And like supplements like curcumin and just different things that could possibly help him. But the main thing was that he tested it against all these chemo drugs that could possibly be given to Alan for his treatment. And our oncologist, Dr. Anderson, called us from vacation. I remember he's like, I'm on vacation, but I have to call you and tell you this news. He's like, Alan's tumor in the lab went into complete remission. when it was put into the test tube with this drug called propranolol. He's like, this is so exciting. This means that he can go on propranolol and hopefully it'll wipe out his cancer. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So we went on propranolol. He went on propranolol. And then a couple other drugs were added to it to try to get a better response. And propranolol did help him kind of stay. He wasn't in remission necessarily, but he wasn't getting new cancer.
Right.
Wow.
For a couple of years, but it killed his body. So it had horrible side effects, like stomach, like it killed your stomach, your lining. He started he's a very athletic guy, played sports his whole life, was playing volleyball in his 40s. He was playing basketball at 6 a.m. He's just super athletic and active. And propranolol took away like all of his like muscle ability. Like he would walk up the stairs at home and collapse in bed because it just like fatigued your muscles so badly that you had nothing. You had no energy in your bones and your muscles. It turned your hair white. His hair was white, which he hated because he wants nobody to know still.
I was going to say, would he rather be bald or have white hair?
I know. He hated it all. He was just like, why does it have to? He was like looking into like dyeing it. He wanted at this point still, this is like 2018, 4 years in, he still didn't want anybody to know he had cancer. Like he was still hiding it from people as much as he could. He was still working full time.
Oh my God. How did he do that?
It was so hard. It was really hard because this drug took like all of his energy, all of his muscle strength, like everything was gone. It killed him.
So he almost had no health span at that point.
It was bad. And at that point, he's like, I think I'm going to have to go part-time.
Yeah.
And so after a couple of years, he switched to part-time. He's like, I can't do it all. And I felt so bad for him because his quality of life like declined a lot. And, we still have young kids and he just wants to be a dad to them and play with them. And it was hard for him. He was just so tired all the time. That's when I think most people go through chemo and they experience that. Like he never had any of that until this point, like 4 years in. That it was like a delayed because of this particular drug. But it did like help him maintain like just this, he wasn't having like large tumors or there wasn't a lot of growth. There would be spots like here and there, but they were taken care of by radiation. So it was like, we were between a rock and a hard place because it was like, yeah, this drug is like keeping you alive basically.
Yeah.
But
barely.
at what? Yeah.
Yeah, there was a cost to it.
There's a cost to it.
So did you have to make a decision for him to go off and
so we would like toy with like the dosages. He'd be like, can I try to go down in dosage a little bit?
Yeah.
And so he would do that for a little while. Or we tried different, like he'd be like on 3 weeks, off a week, on 3 weeks. Like we tried different, just schedules to see if that helped at all. He went down in dosage sometimes and he'd go back up if he felt better. It was a lot of that kind of like, how can I be on this and stay on it, but not have it like kill me?
At what point did he then get to?
So he was on that for like 2 years, and then like 2018 until 2020. 2020, May 2020 of May, his scans were good. Like everything looked stable, nothing surprising. His doctor's like, if you could keep going, this seems to be doing the job.
You're like, we can,
and we're
kind
like,
of.
Okay, yeah. We were like, okay. There's nothing else. There was nothing else out there. I mean, this was really his only hope.
Then enter COVID, right? We're in COVID time.
Yeah. We're in COVID too. That's right. Because that was huge. June, July, August. So May was a good scan. August comes, and we were about to leave on vacation. And he has a scan right before, and it was a crazy scan because all this stuff showed up, like all over, like his lungs looked weird, his back looked weird. But the weird thing is, all of the specialists at Cleveland Clinic, like he had a radiation oncologist, he had Dr. Anderson, who was his sarcoma specialist. He had all these different specialists there. None of them could figure out what the scans showed.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
It was so bizarre. They were like, some of them were like, I think it's radiation recall damage, like from all these years.
Yeah.
Because it can be a delayed effect.
Yes.
And then he started losing his sight, his vision.
Oh my gosh.
It was radiation recall 3 years later that's now like affecting his vision because they did brain MRIs and it was all this white matter and they didn't know if it was cancer. They didn't think it was cancer in his brain, but they thought it was all these late effects from radiation.
Oh my gosh.
So, and then they didn't know what all this stuff was in his body. They thought that could have been, because he had so much radiation everywhere through the years. So they were like, this could be tissue damage, but it's hard to tell. And they were like all on different pages. Like some of them were like, we think it's cancer. And other people were like, I think it's radiation. And they couldn't figure it out. We go on vacation and we were trying to be optimistic. But I remember like the whole week I was like crying. I could not focus. I was just like, this is bad. I think this is bad. And then he stopped being able to drive that week. He's like, I can't see. Like, I don't think I should drive. And so I started at that point in August, I started taking over all the driving. And he didn't drive after that, after August. His eyesight just kept getting worse.
Did the kids notice at any point? You know, did they like ask questions or?
He did such a good job of hiding it. I can't believe 6 years he hid it, but he did. It was a lot of like, Dad's just tired. You know, he has a couple spots on his back that came back. He still would not let me say cancer to them. So I never said cancer. I think for him, it was like, was a sign of like, I don't know if it was weakness for him or a sign of like, I'm going to die. Like he didn't want them to think he was going to die.
And they were very, very young, right? Like you said, 1, 4, and 6.
Well, at this point, yeah, when he was first diagnosed. But then by 2020, that's almost 3 years ago. So now they're 12, 10, and 6. So they were older. And my middle son was playing for this premier soccer team, which my husband really wanted him to do, and he was doing it. But then my husband stops being able to drive. So now, like, I have to do all the driving. I'm driving him to, like, the city to practice 5 nights a week. And it's got really crazy just because I was responsible for, like, all the kids' stuff now. He's slowly getting worse. There's all these appointments that are happening because the doctors are trying to figure out what's going on with him. He's starting to feel worse. Like, his energy levels are, like, you know, you're just starting to get this awful feeling in the pit of your stomach where you're like, is this the beginning of the end?
Yeah.
And I think he never really came out and said it at that time, but I think he was feeling it too. And I remember that's when we never talked about death ever. Like he couldn't go there. And I would not be the one to bring it up with him. Like if he was going to bring it up, I would talk with him, but I'm not going to bring it up with him. Like I'm his mental health person. And so we never really talked about death ever. And like August, September, he started saying like, am I not going to make it? Am I not going to make it? And I would be like, no, you're going to make it's going to be, we're going to figure this out. We're going to figure this out. But he was getting weaker. Like his legs were getting, you know, I would start having to help him get into bed. And
it's interesting. It's like you look back and you realize like, in the moment, it feels like, yeah, like this is just progression, but like things are going to be okay. We're going to keep going.
Yes.
But you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, that was actually the beginning of the end. Like there's so many signs of like, that was it, but you just don't really clue into them.
And you don't want to. So you're like, just keep pushing forward and you're like hanging on to any positive word that you can, like our integrative oncologist was still like, no, like, these scans could mean this. Like I've seen scans that look like cancer, but it's not. So we were still like, maybe it's not, but they were still trying to figure it out at Cleveland. And
I don't know what would be worse. Like just saying like this is like, this is the beginning of the end, so
A false hope is terrible.
or this just giving and hope.
It's all bad.
Yeah, you're right. It's all bad. It is.
It was all bad. And it's like I didn't know what to do. I just followed his lead. And so Alan, from October to December, the pain started getting really, really bad. And it's COVID. And so he had to go to emergency, I think 4 times just in the month of October. And I had to drop him off because I couldn't go in emergency with him, which was awful because he'd be like, don't leave me. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. And then things just went downhill. Like he started hallucinating from all the drugs he was on as the pain meds went off. And we would switch from like, we'd be on methadone to oxycodone and all like the heavy stuff. And then he's hallucinating and he would call me from the hospital. Oh, it would break my heart. And he'd be like, I think there's a conspiracy going on here and the nurses are trying to, like, just crazy talk.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I couldn't be there with him, which was like heart-wrenching. And I would try to talk him down like at 2 a.m, like, it's okay, you're in a safe place. And I couldn't be there in person and it was horrible.
It's awful.
It was awful. And he's by himself trying to manage all these crazy thoughts from these heavy drugs that he's on. Oh, it was just an awful, awful memory. And yeah, things just got worse. There was one last attempt at immunotherapy. So I found like a couple case studies on the internet about ewing sarcoma patients, like 2 of them who had like these immunotherapy drugs that were given to them. They were stage 4 and it put them into remission. And I was like so desperate. I'm like, we have to try this. We have to try this.
This is the end of 2020, like November, December.
This is December. This is December 2020. I also looked into going to like some of those like alternative clinics. There was all this research on Ewing sarcoma patients going to Germany. So I was like, we got to go to Germany. Like I was so desperate, but I knew like he couldn't even do it physically. He wouldn't have been able to travel. It was COVID, but I was like hanging on to every hope, any hope. I was willing to do anything. And he was kind of out of it and it was awful. But anyways, we didn't end up going anywhere.
So did he make it to 2021? Did he make it through the new year?
No.
Oh.
He passed away December 23rd.
Oh my gosh, my wife's birthday.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a crazy coincidence.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
What are the holidays like?
Nowadays? You mean now?
Yeah. Is it bittersweet celebrating the holidays? Like, my mom passed in, actually it'll be a month from today, April 8th. And I just can't imagine like having the holidays as well. Just that's so much, usually a joyous time. And after all these years of trying and getting, NED and then not, and then NED. And I just,
that Christmas was terrible because, he died 2 days before. My family always celebrates on the 24th, like Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
And they were like, we're going to come over. And I'm like, I don't want to. I was like, I just wanted to be with him.
Yeah.
I know I had 3 kids, but like, I was in such a bad place where like, I just kept saying, I just want to be with him. I just want to be with him. Obviously he was my life. He was my husband. But like for those 6 years, like it was like tunnel vision. Like,
yeah,
like
I do.
That's all. That was my life. Like my obsession was keeping him alive. And that's all I did like 24/7 other than like take care of my kids. But like all of a sudden he's gone. And that life of mine like ended with him.
Yes.
Like that, all that research, I had all these connections with people all over the world. I still do. My Ewing sarcoma community, like that was my life. And like, it just all just ended. And like, people are talking to me about Christmas. Like, I don't give a shit about Christmas. Like, I just want to be with my husband, like, and they're like, no, we're going to come over. We want to celebrate. And I'm like, why are you saying this to me? I was like so angry. They're like, you have to do it for the kids. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't care.
Yep.
I don't care. Like, do you understand? Like, I don't. So then my mom and my sister got worried about me. I think they thought that I was like suicidal, and I don't think I ever would have killed myself, but all I knew is I just wanted to be with him. I don't think I would have taken my life, but
I think it's a very common thing. I had the same thing. I have a buddy, his wife passed away. Like everybody that I've talked to, it's that same thing where it's like, but if you don't experience it, it sounds crazy, but it's like, I'm not saying I want to go jump off a bridge. I'm saying I just want to be with her. And like, she's not here, she's wherever, and I want to go there.
Yeah, it's exactly how I felt.
Yeah. And there's an element of you dying when your partner dies. Like
Yeah.
I am not literally who I was before 11/08, September 30th is not who I am now. I died. And I'm just on this discovery of who the fuck am I?
Totally. You lose you're part of this person. I mean, you want to think that you're your own person, right? Like we're all unique, but like you blend to become a partnership and part of this person, and you have kids together and this life together. And then it's just gone one day. One day it was there and the next day it's not. And you're like, what the heck just happened? And people are trying to like come over with food for Christmas. And I'm like, just leave me alone. Like, but I didn't want to be left alone, but I didn't want to be with anybody.
Exactly.
I didn't want to talk to anybody. I don't know what I wanted. I just wanted to go to sleep and not wake up is what I wanted for a really long time. For like months. I'd like hated waking up in the morning. I'd be like, oh, this is the worst. I don't want to wake up. What do I have going for me? Like I've got 3 kids that I have to take care of on my own now. Like, why do I want to wake up to that? That was hard with him. Now it's all on me, you know? It's hard with a partner.
Yeah, you're forced to be a single parent. You're forced to lose the life that you thought you would have had.
Yeah.
You've slowly watched your partner fade away from you, and you were so focused on just having one more day with them. And even though like, you know, I think for us, like we had the experience of watching them die, you think like, oh, I'm preparing for this and I'm getting ready for this and I know it's coming. But then you look back and you're like, fuck, that literally came out of nowhere, when it in some ways it didn't, but in so many ways it did. And now you're just like, what do I do? What am I supposed to do?
Yeah. And you know, sometimes you hear people say like, well, like you said, like at least you had that time to think about it and prepare. And I'd rather have that than sudden. But I think there's negatives to both, you know, like
to both. That's right.
You're watching him go from like healthy to unhealthy in a matter of like 4 months.
Yeah.
For me, like I hate this, but that's all I can think of in my memories. Like all I keep replaying is like the last 4 months, specifically the last 2 weeks when he was in the hospital. And I can't get that reel out of my head. And I hate it because I want to remember like the first, 10 years we were together, 12 years. And it's just that replay of like the hardest 4 months of our life. Like I hate that, but it's like seared into my brain because it was such an intense, right? Like experience that like I can't get past that. And I'm struggling. It's been 2 years and however many months. And like, I'm still struggling to like, not, when I think of him, not think of him in the hospital and him those last 4 months.
Yeah. Do you ever experience like thinking back in those last moments of like, oh, why did I do this? Or why did I do this? Like, I think about all these times where I'm like, why didn't I do better? Why couldn't I have been better? Why couldn't I have listened? Why couldn't have I like engaged in this? Like everything just becomes like, I fucked up so bad. I wasted that time, and you just beat yourself up over it. And it's just like the most awful thing ever.
Yeah, you do. It's that hindsight of like, man, if I knew that September was our last September, I would have done this. Or if I knew that was my last time being with him in the hospital when he was aware, I would have said this, and this, and I didn't.
Me too. Do you feel like you got to say goodbye to him with him present?
So the last 2 days he was in the hospital, he was in hospice. And I know he could hear me. Like he stopped. So the kids came Monday. He died on Wednesday. The kids came in on Monday. before he physically moved to hospice, he was still in palliative care. And like, his brother was in the room before I brought the kids in, and his brother like got him all like geared up. He's like, the kids are coming, you know, try to be like, give it all you got. Cause at that point, you know, he's exhausted. He's sleeping a lot. And so the kids came in and he was like talking to them, and like he seemed like he was alert. They stayed maybe 20 minutes. They'd made cards for him like feel better, get better. And he had all this energy, it seemed like, to spend with them, like more than he had. And then when they left, he was just kind of done. Like he gave it all he had to, like, you know, he knew it was goodbye. I don't think they knew it was goodbye. I knew it was goodbye. But after that point on Monday, he was moved to hospice, and we didn't really have a conversation after that. That was kind of it, his time with the kids, which I'm glad he had. But he was sleeping a lot, and I think he heard me. Like, I know he heard me when I was talking to him. In his last moments, I talked a lot, and I just, you know, I love you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. Like, you make me, I can't believe all that you went through and all that you did. And so I'm pretty sure he heard me. There was this one point, I love this story. He wasn't really able to talk the last day or two. And he is a lifelong St. Louis Rams football fan, like since he was like 5.
Uh-oh. He's Rochester man, and he's not a Buffalo Bills fan?
No, Ram fan. And he prided himself. He was like, I'm like one of the only like 5 people in Rochester who loves the Rams. And he loved that about himself. And yeah. My middle son is a mini version of my husband, but he has always loved the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So that's his team. Well, of course, Brady's playing for the Buccaneers at the time. And so I'm in hospice with my husband, and his eyes are closed, and I'm like, you know, it's like, what do I talk about? So I'm like, I'm going to tell you what I got the kids for Christmas, you know? And so I was like, so I got Austin this, and I got Jake this, and I'm listing all the things, and I was like, oh, I have to tell you. I'm like, Austin really wants a Brady jersey. And Alan has not said anything for like 2 days, right? And he's like, he's like, he shakes his head in this loud, like, definitive, like, no. I think that was like the last thing he said was no to a Brady jersey for my son, which is so him. So I know he heard me. You know, he was listening during that time. So I do feel like he knows how I feel.
So you feel like you got closure? Wow. I use that term very loosely, but yeah.
I mean, like you said, like I wish those months before, like we'd had more conversations, but he didn't want to have those. And that I think he would have left us sooner if he and I talked about death, because he couldn't go there to maintain his physical abilities to stay alive. So anyways, I wish we had more in-person moments at the end that we didn't really have because of all the drugs and the meds, and he couldn't stay awake the last 2 weeks. And, you know, I have regret.
Yeah, I definitely do too.
But I do have to say, I don't know if this is a good segue into this, but I feel like I connect with him through mediums. I don't know if you guys have done mediums. I hear from him through mediums, and I know for sure it's him for just crazy things that have come up that I'm like, what?
We had our first guest, Carl, was on, and he does mediums, and he communicates with his dad. And I meet with him every week, and he keeps telling me, like, you need to do it. And I'm like, I don't know if I can. I do have a story about it. I'm not going to go into it here, but like, I get very, very nervous. I'm curious, like, what your experience is with it.
I've seen several. There's a place here in Rochester that I've gone to in person. There's a bunch of mediums there. Some are better than others, but the one that I swear by that has literally changed my life since Alan died is this woman, Farrah Gibson, who's on Facebook. She lives in, I think it's Arizona. So I've done 2 or 3. I only do it like once or twice a year because she's really expensive. And plus they say you shouldn't do it very often because your loved ones like want you to live and not depend on like what they say. Like this is kind of our path and our life, and like they don't want to be the ones to kind of interfere with it type of thing. So I try to respect that and do it like twice a year. But she's changed my I don't want to say my beliefs because I've always been spiritual, but I feel like he's right, like literally, like he's sitting like right here listening to all of this. He has come through and said specific things about conversations I've had with each of my kids. Like, I know you talked to Jake about playing golf. You got him a new computer last week. You moved the furniture in Quinn's room. Like all these things like have come through my readings that I'm like, oh my God, like that's insane, you know?
What has been the biggest impact of that?
So as Alan was going through this for 6 years, like I grew up Catholic, but I became less Catholic through this and more spiritual, meaning like, and that was partly because I got him into doing a lot of mental and emotional work too, like thinking this will help, you know, like clear his emotional stuff in his head and stuff that happened as he was growing up. And because, you know, you hear about that with cancer or with any disease, right? Like get rid of all the emotional stuff and work on your mental health. And so I got him into a lot of that, and I got myself into a lot of that. So I've become really spiritual through that process of him having cancer. And I feel like it's just helped me feel as though he's still living life with us. Mm. It's just I can't access his voice and his advice. Like I try to tap it, like I'll talk to him in my head. Oh my gosh, yesterday, this happens a lot too, where like I ask him for signs. I get signs a lot, like a lot of hearts. Like I get hearts in all these weird places and in ways, but like all the time. And I think that's his sign for me and for my daughter. We do like half a heart every night. Like she'll do this and I'll do this and we'll say hearts to daddy. And I think he leaves me hearts all over the place. But I'll also ask him for signs. So yesterday I'm in the car and I'm like, oh, I'm having such a hard week. Can you give me like just a definitive sign so I know it's you? I know that I'm not like questioning, like, is this him? Is this not him? So I'm like flipping through the stations in the car, and I stop on the station, and it's our wedding song, which is not like a common song that's on the radio all the time. It's Alison Krauss, like When You Say Nothing at All. Like I rarely hear that song, and it was playing, and I'm like, okay, I know this is you. Thank you. Thank you. And at the beginning, when he first passed, like I would go into Wegmans and I would listen to the music because it was always songs that related me to him, that was a connection to him. And so I felt like that was him using the songs in the store to like be like, I'm here. So I do feel like he's here. I'm still angry that he's not here in person. I'm angry that I can't get his advice with the kids or with me, or like that I can't hug him, you know?
Yeah.
But spiritually, I feel like his energy he's here. He's just not in my form, in our form, but he's here in energetic form, and he can hear everything. He's like proven through these mediums that like he hears all of my conversations that I'm having with people, which is like crazy.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I think that's amazing that you have at least that to hold on to. And I hear these things, and there's a part of me that gets jealous of like, I wish I could feel definitively like Ariana was there. And like I said, like there's been some weird experiences, but in the back of my mind, I'm always just like, you know, if Ariana in the afterlife is anything like she was in real life, she's just going to leave me alone anyways. And just be like, get the fuck over it and go do something with your life and move on, or move forward rather. You know, we don't move on, because we had a lot of conversations about me moving forward after she died, being with somebody else, like just trying to get on with my life. Like she tried so hard to make me okay with it. So there's a part of me that's just like, I don't even think she would show up if I went to a medium. Yeah, because she knew how painful it might be for me. But so you have the spirituality, you do the medium. It sounds like you've been doing a lot with your mental health. It's very recent. I mean, I consider like us still in the very recency of this. What are some other things that you've done to help you cope, and maybe not even cope with the grief? Because the grief is one thing, but like you mentioned earlier, it's this life where like you have this private grief that just attacks us all the time, but then you have kids and you have work and these responsibilities and everything around it that is required of you. So what have you done to try to cope with that and like actually be successful in surviving that?
I think what's helped me is I don't know if I feel successful, to be honest, in a lot of the things I do. I try. I do feel, like I said to you earlier, CJ, like a lot of days I just feel like I'm trying to get through, which I hate.
Yeah.
Because who wants to live life like that, right? Like I just want to get through the day without some big crisis happening.
Yeah.
I've struggled a lot with, like he was my partner, so he had all these roles in our relationship. Like he did all the money stuff, all the finance stuff, and now I'm like taking it all on, and I'm like, I don't know any of this stuff. So it's a lot of help. He has a giant group of friends that he grew up with, very close, like neighborhood friends, like since they were little, that to this day they're all still very close, and I've maintained relationships with them, and they're always like, what can we do? What can we do?
Oh, that's awesome.
Let us come over. So that's been nice. Emotionally, like the kids and I talk about him literally every day. Just naturally, the kids will be like, remember dad would say this, or like we'll be eating something and they'll be like, remember dad used to cook this, or he used to say this about this, or he used to make me try that. Like his name or a memory comes up naturally for us on a daily basis, which helps me a lot. It's not like I have to force it with the kids and I'm like, let's talk about dad, or like, let's, it's like he's still here in some ways, because they keep him, I don't want to say alive. I don't know if I like that phrase, but they keep him like kind of involved, or they keep his words still with us, like in our conversations. And that's helped me a lot.
That's great. Man, I feel like we could go on for so much longer, but out of respect for your time, we can close it up here. But I do want to ask one more question. And
yes,
in thinking of other people who are maybe they're kind of where you and I were a couple of years ago, or rather like 2 or 3 years ago, or they're still early in it, or for people who are friends or family of folks who are going through it. Do you have any one specific piece of advice that you would say to kind of help?
I do.
Lay it on us.
The first thing that came to my mind was actually what frustrated me the most and was hardest for me when he passed was people who would not talk about him with me. I hated that. And I don't know if you felt like this, CJ, or if it's common to feel like this, but like I said earlier, like we talked about, like he was just here and now he's not a day later. And he was my everything. And he might not have, been everybody else's everything. He wasn't, obviously. Like he was a brother, he was a dad, he was an uncle, he was all these roles, but he was my everything, and I lived with him 24/7. So it's not the same loss for everybody. And I think for them, like for a lot of family members, it was easier for them to not talk about him because it was hard for them.
Yeah.
But for me, I was livid because they would try to talk about everything else but him. Like, let's talk about the vacation coming up, or let's talk about the weather, or let's talk about what we're going to do for the holiday. And I'm like, I don't care about any of that. I just want you to talk about him because he's my person. And he's all I think about all the time. And I was with him for 20 years and he's all I know. And, and, and you want to talk about like all this other stuff that I couldn't care less about. I hated that. I hated it. And I tried to tell people that. I'd be like, can we just talk about him? Or indirectly I'd talk to people and be like, I just don't like when nobody addresses it and they just act like, and maybe that's okay for them, but I lived with him all the time for 20 years. Like I can't just not talk about him. I wanted to talk about him all the time and other people didn't. And I hated that.
Did you get a sense of, not to prolong this, did you get a sense of people when they would approach you after he passed, whatever amount of time, that they would check in, hey, how are you doing? But what they're really saying is like, are you back to who you were and you're normal and we're good and we can just kind of move forward? Did you ever feel that sense of like that kind of energy from people?
Yeah, like I don't know what people look for when they ask that question, like, how are you? Like, I don't know if they want you to say like I'm doing better or I'm not sure. Like I know there's not a great question to ask a grieving person, right? Like what do you ask them really? But yeah, I think for me, I would just avoid people as much as I could because I didn't know what I wanted to say to them and I didn't want to talk to like acquaintances. I wanted to be around like a tight group of family and friends, and that was really, really it. I was grateful that it was COVID, to be honest, because everybody's masked, right? And I could just disappear in Wegmans and not have to talk to anybody because they didn't know who I was probably, and I didn't look up. I didn't want to see anybody for a really long, like for the first year, I would say. Yep. I just avoided everybody. I'm like, I don't want to talk about stuff you're going to talk about with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like normal life stuff.
Right. And I didn't know how to answer like, how are you either? Because I didn't have a good answer for that. Otherwise, if I was truthful, I'd be like, crappy, horrible.
Yeah.
Like, I hate life.
Life sucks right now.
Yeah. But nobody wants to hear that from you.
I still don't have a good answer because it's like, what am I going to say again? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm the same. I'm fucking getting through it. Like, some days are great, maybe.
Right.
But like, I'm tired of like, and I know people are tired. Like they don't care. Not that they're not insensitive, but like, they don't need to hear the same thing over. And no, who wants to hear the same thing over and over? So I kind of just like,
and that's how you feel all the time. Yeah.
Like, good, fine, whatever, whatever. Get on. It's okay.
Yeah. You say like what you think will just get them to move on
Okay, Laura. So what we do to end this is we do a quick lightning round to kind of like, since it's usually a pretty heavy topic, typically what we talk about on here. It's just a fun little lightning round. So you can't think, you just have to answer. It should be like a 1-sentence answer or 1-word answer. Hold on, Ashley. What am I going to ask? Hold on.
I'm nervous.
Let me look up. I used to have questions and I lost them. All right, Ashley, you go first.
All right. What is your favorite day of the week?
Friday.
Me too.
Texting or talking?
Texting, especially since Alan passed. Texting.
Yep. Same here. On texting, does it take you a long time to get back to people sometimes? Or are you pretty fast about it?
Yeah. I'm like, I mean, I'm usually pretty fast, but I've given myself a lot of grace in the last couple of years where I'm like, I don't need to answer right away. Like they can wait.
Yeah. I found my emotional capacity
I've become more
smaller.
Yeah. I've become more like about me than I was before, I guess.
CJ replies to me very quickly though. So if anyone says that he's not good at replying, you're just not me.
That's true. But I have do not disturb on, and only my kids and you, and then a few family members are the only ones that can break through my do not disturb.
Yeah. Next question. First celebrity crush.
Probably like Ralph Macchio, Karate Kid.
Oh, damn. Okay. What's the fastest speed you've ever driven in a car?
85.
Okay. Did Alan look like Ralph Macchio?
Actually, he kind of did. Okay. I think so.
I can kind of picture it a little bit. I don't know
why. That's funny.
Oh, this is because I love dogs. Big dogs or small dogs?
I had a big dog growing up, but I'm allergic to dogs. So I think the only dog I could ever own would be like a poodle because they're hypoallergenic.
Tapas or pasta?
Pasta.
I actually am like a really big tapas fan, but I also love pasta. So.
Oh, fuck that. No way. Even over padella?
Well, okay, but padella is like tapas style pasta. So that's the ultimate. That's the both. That's
Okay, last question. If you could ask God anything, what would you ask him?
If we have like a blueprint for our lives, if it's planned beforehand, I guess, type of thing.
That's a good question. Yeah. What was our spouses and parents supposed to die?
Yeah. Right. Because that's kind of where I'm at now. Like, is that how life works? I don't know.
Well, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. And thank you for sharing.
It's very cathartic to talk about it too. I think it's like part of the healing process. So thank you guys. I appreciate it. And thank you for creating this podcast. I'm hoping it'll help others.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast.